And now I'm realizing that I say that every single time I start one of these videos, so I find that very entertaining and funny. Um, but yeah, I am live once again for my Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. I'm going to invite my friend now. Let's see if he jumps in here with me. Are you here?
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Hell yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Very good.
It was funny. So now that I've got this into a podcast format, I was listening back to like the beginnings of these, and I realized that every single time I start one of these before the guest joins, I go, and we're live. Every single time. So I had to do it. I had to do it again this time.
I do that with my guests too, even though we're not live, just to freak them out.
That's fair. How you doing, buddy?
Good, you?
Doing good. Oh, we're gonna rep some merch. Is that what that is?
Well, no, it's just a one-off for me.
Okay.
I just
Okay.
don't care for my hair right now.
Same. I went fishing yesterday, which is not a normal activity for me. But I had some friends go, and I was like, you know what? I like being on the boat, out on the water. Let's do it. And then I showered last night, threw everything off. I was like, I'm gonna wear a hat. We'll go with it.
Well, you do have some color in your face.
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very rosy cheeks. So I guess I'm ready for Santa Claus.
Here in Canada, where it's actually not too bad right now, but you can get wicked sunburns even in the winter, just from the reflection off the snow and stuff. And, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. It was the reflection off the water. It was actually okay, relatively speaking, cold. It was when we started. It was in the high 40s Fahrenheit. So
Right.
I don't know what that is in Celsius. That's not my area of expertise. Are you all Fahrenheit or Celsius?
We're Celsius.
Okay.
Like the rest of the world.
Well, I was gonna say I just assume the rest of the world's progressive. That's just how that works.
You Americans are really digging your heels in with that Fahrenheit thing.
The Fahrenheit thing and not adopting the metric system on a regular basis. But then we sometimes do this. So it's like weird.
Hey, Jody's from Australia. Hello, Jody.
From Australia. So wait, now I'm curious, does Jody know you or Jody know me? That's what I want to know.
I'm not sure. Fahrenheit
Jody,
has advantages.
I don't know.
I guess. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't
maybe.
know.
I think why people like Fahrenheit in America so much for temperature, at least, is okay. She follows Todd. Good. Yeah. Anything other than metric. Yeah. Okay. I'll read the rookie page later, but and a comment. Oh, that's good. The one thing I will say is like when you look at the Fahrenheit system, 100 degrees is fucking hot.
Yeah.
So it's like that feels right. Whereas Celsius, you're like, what is considered hot in Celsius?
Well, Celsius is convenient because water freezes at 0 and water boils at 100.
Okay.
So it's all based on water.
I'm sold, except I have absolutely zero power to change that. So I'll play the part of the stubborn American who is stuck on it. That's just the way the world works, unfortunately.
Yeah, matter. I mean, it makes it more interesting for everyone.
Okay. Well, normally this is where I segue this into. By the way, hi Todd. For those of you who don't know, Todd is a good friend of mine. Hence the Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. And I've gotten to know him for the last couple of years through just kind of our shared passion for mental health. Both creators in the space in different ways, but share a lot of the same themes. And I find, you can introduce yourself, do a little bit about yourself here in a second, but I want to call out that this is actually kind of a full circle moment for us, Todd.
It fucking is.
Because for those who are unaware, so here's how this played out and why Todd and I know each other. When I was writing my book, I got to this point where I was like, okay, I've written the rough draft. I've sent out to people, and the general feedback is take at least 30 days away from your work, come back to it later, have some other people read it. That's kind of the general philosophy. So I had this time that I always set aside to write, and I had this void to fill, and I was like, okay, the book's coming to a close. I need a different creative outlet. So that's why I kind of a little bit played around with content. But I also was like, I'm a self-published author. I have to promote on my own, and I have to get out there and be proactive because I don't have an agency that's able to do this for me. And so I just started blindly reaching out to people. I went on Spotify, and I searched podcasts, and I searched mental health, and then I would just come across different podcasts and find them, and then I would just DM them. I would DM everybody and just be like, "Hi, I'm Will. I'm writing a book. It's going to be out at this date. Would love to, appear in your podcast." Some would just ignore. Some would say thanks, but no thanks. And Todd was one of those people that said thanks, but no thanks. No. The actual answer was Todd was very booked up. You were just really booked up at the time, and you were like, "Hey, I don't have a good slot for you right now, but I appreciate your passion." And then you said, and this is where the full circle part comes into play. You said, "I'm trying to do Instagram lives though. Would you be game to do that with me?" And I was like, "Sure, I don't care." And so him and I didn't know each other really, but we both knew we liked mental health. And out of nowhere on a Monday night at like 10 o'clock Eastern, we just did this live. I think we were on for like an hour and a half, right?
Could be.
Something like that. And at that point, we were like, I really like you. And you were like, "I really like you too." And then we were cool, and we just stayed friends. And then eventually one day he hits me up out of nowhere, and he's like, "Hey, I've got an opening, 4th of July. We're doing a podcast episode." And I eventually did your podcast, and we stayed friends. We've introduced each other to different people. You've opened my audience up to so many Canadians. It's not even funny. And that's always been a very fun part of this relationship. So that's the full circle part. I've talked way too much already. So Todd, why don't you introduce yourself?
Are we live?
Oh, we are live.
I'm kidding. Hello, I'm Todd Rennebohm. I am a suicide attempt survivor. I'm in recovery of addiction. I just hit 8 years clean the other day, and an advocate and all that kind of stuff. But of course, like during COVID, like many people, I started a podcast called Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I finished a kid's book that I had started. Here, let me grab it somewhere. It's called Sometimes Daddy Cries. It's my children's book, also self-published. And about a year ago I started the YouTube channel, but I'm not a big fan of YouTube. Will and I had this whole discussion. It's there. And thank you, Jody. Thank you, Mikey, for the congratulations. Someone said they can't hear something, but
something I did learn from my wife. If you're watching this on an iPhone, if you have your phone on silent, for whatever reason, sometimes that inhibits your ability to hear it. My wife learned this the other day. I remember it was like the first one I did, and she was like, "Will, I can't hear your audio." And I was like, "Everyone else can, so I don't know what's happening." And then she realized I thought it was my mic, so I've tried different mics and different things for this. But
sorry, someone's got a great question. Do you have a family? I do. I have 2 boys, 20 and 18 years old, and a lovely wife that's stuck with me through all the rough times. And I've given her many reasons to leave in the past, but we've actually grown up. I say we grew up together, even though not as children, but like as 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, we've grown up together, and I'm pretty grateful and lucky that way. And about a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I've learned a lot about that and a lot about all my other ailments and how they're basically under the umbrella of ADHD, and had no idea. So now I feel like I'm actually I was proactive in my healing, I guess, and my mental health before, but now it actually feels like I'm treating the actual cause and not the symptoms now. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Real quick, I don't want to get too off topic, but I do want to quickly say, because now I am on Spotify, and you can listen to these later. So for those who are listening on Spotify and maybe hear this and you're like, wait a minute, where are some of these questions coming from? This recording takes place live on Instagram Live. So you can catch it. I promote it pretty regularly on my social media at mental_health_with_will. So feel free to find that there. You can watch it live yourself, or you can come back later and listen on Spotify. So that's where the questions are coming from in the chat function. But so going back to, Todd, you're talking about your growth. You said something that like really stood out to me. You said you grew, even though it wasn't as children, just 20-year-old adults, you grew up together.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, because something I've thought about a lot. I think when you're on a mental health journey, it's a very easy scapegoat to go blame your parents. My parents did this, my parents did that. Sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not rightfully so. But one thing that I know that it took me like getting older and realizing was, in the case of like my parents as an example, I look at them and I realize by the time they were my age, they had 3 kids. They had 3 kids, one of which had multiple brain surgeries. And yours truly, for those who don't know that. And they're still figuring themselves out. They're still trying to understand how they work. I'm barely a functioning adult at 33 right now, let alone, and I don't have children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the kind of keeping the theme of full circle here, I think is getting older, as you talk about like the growing up you do from age, you think, oh, I'm 18 or 21 or whatever the age is. You're like, oh, I'm an adult. Maybe maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but you don't stop growing up. So can you tell a little bit about like that growing up relationship that you and your wife shared?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was in my 20s, I was bouncing around from job to job. I was drinking lots. I was starting to use marijuana more. Well, early in my 20s, I was playing in a band too, so it was like that was my full-time job actually. So I was in bars and shit all the time. So yeah, we started having kids in my late 20s, started settling down, and by like my early 30s, I was basically high functioning, depressed alcoholic. I was still going to work. I had a decent job at the time and all this stuff. Um, but I was not dealing with, I was not being proactive in my mental health. And then eventually I started going on meds. I started seeing therapists. Um, I was still using marijuana and drinking and not doing any of the work the therapist told me to do. So I wasn't, in my mind, I thought I was being proactive, and this is, I'm doing really well for myself. Meanwhile, I'm actually not doing anything really other than going to appointments. So eventually that turned into, well, eventually I started doing stuff that was outside my moral code, that was kind of instant gratification kind of things that, I won't get into too big of details, but I wasn't a great father. I was not a great husband. I was a bad employee. I was a bad son. But I felt like I needed to do these things to make me happy. And eventually, now, on top of the depression, the anxiety, the drug use, the alcohol, now I'm just probably all those combined is what the guilt and shame felt like too. So I've got all of that on top of and eventually it turned into a suicide attempt, and that I guess that was kind of the start of my healing journey, was that first suicide attempt. Kind of, because out of the hospital, I kept using marijuana, and after a little while, I started drinking again. But it kind of started planting seeds in me about recovery and AA and all this stuff. So yeah, and after that, a suicide attempt, I felt like my wife didn't understand what depression was or mental illness was. She really educated herself. She had traumas and issues she had to deal with from childhood, and she was emotionally intelligent enough to know that unless she dealt with those, we wouldn't be good together, right? That's what couples are. It's like if one's super healed and the other one is still in the dumps, that relationship isn't going to work. So if you can kind of heal together, then there's a chance. And that happened. She was seeing somebody, I was seeing somebody, we saw someone together, and that for a few years, and that was kind of helping. But then I was still drinking, like I said, and eventually, as you've heard 1,000 times, healing is not linear. So I had a big dip again, and she actually, for a day, she kicked me out of the house for a day. And I don't blame her at all, because she was like, I can't watch you kill yourself anymore. Like, you're drinking and you're using, and like, I can't, like, I have to protect our kids. I can't have them watch, 100%. So that was the kick in the pants I needed to, like, really dig deep and do the work that I was scared to do, which was first off getting sober. And then once I was sober, then I was in the right mind frame to actually dig deeper. And that, like I said, that was 8 years ago, and I'm still being diagnosed with ADHD. I'm still coming up with traumas that are coming up just now. It took me 8 years of sobriety for these traumas to actually, like, okay, buddy, you're in a good enough place to, like, let's deal with this now. So yeah, that's what I mean by growing up. Like, we became adults together, I guess, and really a little more emotionally mature, maybe, or whatever. And yeah, we're talking about our parents, and like my parents too. They had 4 kids by the time my mom was like 22, so they never got a chance to heal. Or yeah, I mean, they had their own childhood traumas and stuff, so they're just doing the best they could. And at the same time, I don't want people to not blame their parents, but it's not blame their parents, but I mean, they have issues, right? I mean, right or wrong, like you said, I'm not trying to resent them, but yeah. So then, yeah, it's complex, bro. It's all complex.
It's multi-threaded. There's so many different layers to everything when it comes to the mental health journey. And that's why when people say, like, the phrase healing it isn't linear, I think that's an important takeaway for everybody, is realizing that, like, just when you think you have it figured out, like, new things are uncovered, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're like, so, like, let's take the substance abuse part. So whether you're somebody who is, it feels that they're a full-blown addict and they want to completely get off and stay away and be sober, or even if you're just someone who casually indulges, right? If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and it's a conversation I have with myself on a regular basis, because I still consume alcohol and I enjoy it. And for me, like, I have to ask myself all the time, like, hey, like, am I doing this because I'm trying to avoid whatever feelings I may have, or am I doing it because I just enjoy the moment, this, feeling, whatever the case may be. And so I think for me, that's something everyone should, like, constantly evaluate.
Yeah, I tell people
Is to get
all the time, what's the intention? Like, if
yeah.
you like, well, and then that's kind of what the first trip to the hospital was. It was like, after that, it was like, when I say planted seeds, it was like planted these seeds of, like, questioning myself and become a little more self-aware. So it's like, when I did do something, it's like, wait a minute, why am I doing this?
Uh,
But
I
ultimately,
mean,
that didn't matter. I was just like, because I want to, idiot.
yeah, it's man, I could spend so much time talking on this subject. I mean, hell, even this week, I'll be completely vulnerable about it. I had to have a really hard conversation with my wife, because I love her so incredibly much, and she's watching this, and um, I still
Hi.
catch, and I still catch myself in these moments of unfairly so I put her on a pedestal because I love her with everything that I have, and I hold her to the highest esteem. And there still is very much. I've grown up a lot. I've grown a lot as a person, worked on my things, and yet there's still definitely a deep part of me that doesn't feel worthy of her. And so sometimes that's manifests itself in, spiraling with anxiety. Sometimes that manifests itself with, having one too many drinks. Then, whatever the case may be, there's so many different outlets that I have. And I think when I realize it's kind of unpacking the core is it's not tied to one thing. I have to come to the resolution of realizing that, like, she wants to be with me. Like, and I am worthy of that on my own.
Yeah.
And I've earned that, and with her, and I continue to work and try to do those things. So I think it's really, really important, as you mentioned, like, the intention, what is the why behind anything you do, and understanding your why is so, so crucial in the process of healing, because you may uncover that, like, it's not necessarily tied to a specific thing. It is an internal emotion, and that leads to, because, like, for me, like, I've said this before on videos, and I've said this in other lives, I create chaos, and that chaos is my outlet. Chaos is my outlet for the feelings of inadequacy that I have. And so because
Mm.
of that, and I can manifest it in a number of different ways. I can make poor life choices. I can, drink or something or smoke or whatever the case may be. I can do a lot of things. But the core problem is dealing with that internal conflict of I don't feel at peace with myself, and so I have to find confidence or chaos in other places. And then that's when I started finding healthier outlets for that chaos to make, because I still have to let it out, even if I know that information that I just said. I still have to let it out. I still have to find different ways because it's inside me whether I like it or not.
Right.
And so working with my therapist on figuring those things out, it's when I got back into stand-up comedy and started writing, my material literally hours before I went on stage, just to give myself a little mental challenge, if you will. I started bartending again because it was like, it's a chaotic moment that I get to have in peace, but it's like I can only focus on this one thing.
Mm.
So that's like it's kind of fun in that way. To earn those things, but it's the central theme I want people to walk away from in this episode is that like this isn't linear. It's not linear at all, and you're kind of constantly be evaluating different things. So
Mm-hmm.
now,
Yeah, it's not linear, and sometimes I find too that, I've tried all types of treatments and modalities and things, and some of them work for a while, and just not to give up. It's like, okay, that's not, servicing me anymore, so I gotta try something different. Um, sometimes I like the linear thing. Sometimes I have ups and downs, and it's just being self-aware enough that like when I am down, it's like I now have a boundary, whereas I didn't before. So now it's like, oh, I'm hitting that wall again. Okay, what am I not doing, or what should I do differently that I'm not doing? Right. So maybe it's a different treatment, maybe it's a different modality, maybe it's a different outlet to let my chaos go or to get a dopamine hit. So yeah,
no,
100%.
no, and so when you think about your relationship with your wife now that you're in this different place, because now you've pivoted and kind of used these pivotal moments, these things you've learned about yourself as a means of self-expression and sharing with the world. And I think that's something that like we're kindred spirits on. So how has that impacted your relationship with your wife?
I think she's just happy that I am finally found something that I enjoy doing. That because I mean, with the ADHD thing, one of the things is like it's always guilt, shame, anxiety, and the feeling of inadequacy because I'm always bouncing around from job to job to hobby to hobby, and um, so now that I've been doing the podcast for almost 4 years, which is like I've done nothing for 4 years. Like, I'm usually long gone by like year two or year three. So this is something I'm like dedicated to, and she's very happy. But I mean, but it's also a paradox. So it doesn't pay very well. So then I have that mentality raised by boomers and society and whatever that I'm not a good provider for my family because I'm not bringing in much money, but at the same time I'm getting messages from strangers from all over the world telling me how thank you for doing this, and your guest on the podcast helped me so much, and thank you for creating the platform and all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. So it's like I'm walking around feeling like shit because I'm not providing, but yet I pat myself on the back for providing this podcast for people. Um, but that's, even though my wife has nothing to do with the podcast or my public speaking or anything, I tell people she's a huge part of it because she provides for me to be able to do it. So I can go upstairs and eat a sandwich, and I couldn't do that if I was just doing this on my own because I'd be so broke. But she's keeping me healthy and provided and in a safe place, and so that I can do this. And she believes in me and she trusts me enough now um, to do this because I've had other hobbies and stuff where it's like if I was dating someone and they came up to me and it's like I'm gonna do this, it's like you're nuts. But whatever. She's always been a great support and doesn't question me and doesn't put pressure on me. That said, I I put pressure on myself because I can see she gets frustrated and tired at times. So yeah, it's just there's this weird cycle, this weird paradox of small wins and small um, feelings of, well, big feelings of inadequacy at times. But I've also never stuck with anything long enough for it to pan out and actually be successful. So um, I'm feeling hopeful about this. So
Yeah, I mean, and I want to touch on something else with that too, because like it's interesting. I was talking to my wife about whenever I talk to her about anything that I do, whether it's the book, social media, this show now, everything. I'm like, look what we did, and she's like, no, you did this, and I say, no, 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 and I'm not trying to just like blow smoke up her ass. I mean it
yeah,
genuinely. Like, without you, I don't believe in myself enough to make this happen. I don't, without you, when someone makes a shitty comment on something and I feel really down about it, like I know that I have your love. I know that I have your trust in this. And so I don't know if I assume you probably share a similar feeling. It's like whether you're front and center on this or not is irrelevant. Like the fact that you are a part of my life and gives me this freedom in a way to express myself in a way of knowing that like it's all going to be okay.
yeah, 100%, yeah. And someone else, I did a talk the other day, and when I do my public speaking, if I'm feeling like shit, I let people know. Like I don't try to mask it. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm a public speaker and I talk about this stuff, but I'm also human and I'm not cured. I'll never be cured. So when I'm feeling like crap, I'll let people know I'm feeling like crap. And someone said, hey, you are providing for your family. What are you talking about? You're providing a nice, safe place for your children to be emotionally free, and like finances doesn't necessarily mean uh, pro- you're providing. I mean, I know all types of wealthy parents that they fucked up their kids, right, or whatever, right? Um, so yeah, that felt good too. So um, I don't know what the point of that was.
I mean, that's the best part about this is like, the whole central thesis of me starting this show was that like I love podcasts. Obviously, like I love yours. I love, different ones that I've been a part of or managed to follow over the years. But something that like stands out to me is like you have the opportunity while recording and not being live to pause, to take something out, to edit something out, to do all these things. Again, that's not a knock on anybody.
Right.
But I was like, if I'm going to go through the process of doing this, I want it to be a truly live exchange and a genuine conversation to promote something that I'm passionate about and talk to people from various walks of life to be able to understand that. And so to me, like that, so you're like, I don't know where I was going. That's the best part is like, there is no structure to this. Anybody watching or listening later, like there is no script. We do not have a plan. Occasionally I'll throw out like, hey, I know this is something I'm going to talk to you about if you need some time to prepare. Or I will ask guests, like, is there something that's off limits? Because I want to respect people's privacy, right? Like I never want to put someone in an awkward position. But outside of that, there is no direction on this because I want it to be truly organic in that way.
Right.
Um, and
Yeah.
Jody, I don't want to not acknowledge her message that she just put in there too. Um, I want to first start with Todd and I are not licensed professionals at all, and we both are in agreement that while we both want to promote the awareness and good conversations when it comes to this, like first and foremost, I would consult somebody who is a professional. Depending on you mentioned psychosis, had a psychosis episode, so again, I don't, without picking at it, it's none of our business of what that is. But depending on what it is, find someone maybe that's in an area of expertise that can help with that from a consulting perspective. I don't know what your relation to smoking pot and drinking is. The way you worded it makes it seem like it was a negative. So perhaps evaluating why you feel the need to come back to it again. But I want to be very, 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 very clear. You should not be taking advice from guys like us on the internet when it comes to technical diagnoses, when it comes to everything else. Like if I'm an advocate for one thing in mental health, it is that you should seek professional help. We are merely advocates of the conversation because at the end of the day, so much of what drives a lot of these things, anxiety, depression, and stuff, is the fact that people feel alone in their struggle. You feel alone in your struggle, and because you feel alone in your struggle, those things eat away at you, and you believe that no one's going to understand, and no one's going to be there to help you, and so because of that, you get worse and worse and worse. And so what Todd and I share is a passion for trying to have good open conversations to make people feel less alone.
Yeah. And I mean, in early recovery, I was going to AA meetings. I haven't for a few years, but um, you know, I pick and choose what I like and don't like about programs. And one thing I loved about AA was you are never an expert. The only thing you're an expert of is your own story. So you just basically tell people what you did, what you went through, and how you dealt with it, and that's it. And whether they take something from your story or not, whatever. So yeah,
Completely
I
agree.
never I tried to never give advice. I just like yeah.
No, or if there's a version of that, if you like watching one of my clips and it seems like, well, no, when you said that, that's a piece of advice. I'm like, but I try to always be intentional about the idea of like, this is something that worked for me.
Right.
It may or may not work for you. I don't know. But like when it comes to anxiety, like one piece of advice I've randomly have said is like, or have over and over, and not randomly, have over and over said is like saying it out loud. Whatever that thing that's eating away in your mind, say it out loud, put some voice to it, maybe say it in front of another person. Again, that is not from a textbook. That's not from educational background. That is just something that I have learned as a coping mechanism that has worked for me. By no means will I guarantee success for it working for you, but it might be worth a try. It's not going to hurt anything to say to someone you love, hey, this is something that's eating away at my soul. I want to have someone that I love share that with me, and let's work on it together. Because make no mistake, like and I take major issue with random people on the internet trying to give. It could be mental health advice, it could be financial advice, legal advice. If they are not credentialed and not in this, they have no right to be giving you expertise advice. Like I'm sorry, expertise and thought leadership are two, oh my God, they are two sticking points to me, because I'm sorry, those are self-appointed titles. They're self-appointed titles. If someone wants to call me an expert on something, that's their prerogative. I don't get to choose whether or not they say that or not, but I don't get to decide that I'm an expert in anything. But people do it all the time, or claim that I'm a thought leader in the space. No, that's a self-appointed title. It doesn't mean anything. There's no bite to it. Sure, they might have legitimate experience. They might have a number of things, but make no mistake, like if someone has PhD, it's because they wrote a thesis and they defended that thesis and they did years and years of research and they've done a number of things. That is expertise, not some random guy that happens to have a few thousand followers on Instagram.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That said, Jody, I know when I was questioning things like, am I smoking too much weed, or is this going to happen if I start drinking again? That was my self-awareness poking at me, going, "Hey, this is probably a bad idea," or "Hey, this will probably happen if you play, you play the tape through. This probably will happen." And there's, yeah, like we said, it was like the intent, like self-aware enough to stop and figure out what the intent of why I'm doing this is. So anyway, that's what I did. That's what I thought. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I don't want to leave her with nothing.
no, absolutely
but
not.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
absolutely not. No, like, and we're, I'm glad that you were able to put that out there, and the vulnerability it took for you to share that with us on this feed, Jody, is incredible. Um, because I know how hard that is, and Todd and I both do. We know how hard it is to own your demons. It's
yeah,
hard. It's really hard to put yourself out there, um, because you don't know how it's going to be received. But
yeah,
I also think there's something hugely and immensely value in just sharing that vulnerability with someone you care about. You'd be amazed at the connections you can make and how much love and support you'll find just by sharing with people, hey, I'm struggling in this way. Here's how I'm struggling. Because that is going to eat away at you if you leave it by yourself.
yeah, yeah. I found that being honest helped with the guilt,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and I mean just being honest, not just with other people, but with myself,
With
like being
yourself, yeah.
brutally honest and being like, you know what, this is why I'm doing this. Okay, let's figure this shit out now.
All right.
Now, where do I go from here? Yeah.
I've been asked this recently, Todd. I'm curious if you've ever run across this too. Someone I know, struggling with something that we share a bond on, and they were like, "I feel an obligation to be an advocate like yourself." I feel an obligation to do those things, but I'm not sure that I'm, emotionally prepared, any number of things. And so I'm curious your thoughts on if you've met anybody in your life who's like, oh, I want to do what you do, not from like an ambition level, but like out of a sense of obligation.
Right. I don't know if I've ever been asked that, but I've been there. So in my story, after I was out of the hospital for a couple years after my suicide attempt, and Robin Williams passed away, and somebody on the internet said something like, "I'm never going to watch another one of his movies. He's such a selfish, blah blah blah," and I lost it. I mean, anger is definitely a thing in my family with men, and there's a meme I saw that said anger is anxiety's bodyguard, and I'm
I
like,
like it.
a lot of
Yeah.
men, that's true. But sometimes anger, like actual genuine anger, is can be motivating. So I like basically wrote this whole letter about my journey at that point, what it was like being in the hospital, my suicide attempt, everything. And living in a small town, I hadn't really done that yet. So anyway, I did that. The letter blew up, like hundreds of thousands of shares. Like it just was like boom. I was like, holy crap. So anyway, I felt obligated to now, like, okay, I have people's attentions. I'm going to be an advocate. Let's do this. And over the next 2 months, I was like organizing rallies and doing things and blah blah blah. And after 2 months, I was in the hospital again. like it, but that's when I got sober. So, um, yeah, that I was in no mental state to be advocating because I was pretty sick at the time and not knowing it. But at the same time, it was a blessing in disguise because then it really started healing. I really started healing because then I went to the hospital. That's when I got sober and whatever. But it is, yeah. I guess I've never been asked that, but I do just kind of warn people about my story and being like, hey, it, set boundaries. If you're going to do this, if it starts to feel gross at any point or you're starting to get overwhelmed, just you, take care of number one, man. like,
Yeah.
because it can be overwhelming. It can be like you start looking at numbers and talking to politicians and things, and you get frustrated and you just want to start, and then, or people are coming to you asking for advice and or it's just it can be overwhelming and it's like whoa 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 whoa, and next thing I knew I was in the hospital. Um, so yeah, what do you tell people when they ask you that?
Um, well, I'm a big advocate for the idea that I think should, in many ways, should be eliminated from our vocabulary. Um, Doing things out of obligation. I understand the thought process that comes into play, but when it comes to something like this, um, that obligation, I think, can eat away at people when it comes to if you're doing it for that reason, because it'll never be enough in that way. It's like a lot of things, like right, like you were just talking about, you're going to start following metrics and doing all these things. Like once you reach a certain level, then it's the next thing, and the next thing you're constantly chasing. And so, the way I said it, it's like, look, what it was for me was I had this fire that I had this thing inside me that I had to let out. And so for my journey, where it all started, for those who have only started following me recently or something, um, this all started for me as blogging. I started blogging back in like 2018, and because I had gone through, I was in a bit of a transition period of my life. I had gone through some fairly traumatic events, and I was like, I feel better because I went to therapy. I feel better because I'm in a better place mentally, and I can handle this transition period of my life in a different way than my younger self could. And I was like, I want to share that. I want to put that out there because I know for me, yeah, I felt so incredibly alone when I was in my worst parts of my life. And so if I put it out there, I have one actual talent in this entire world, is that I generally speaking lack shame. It's very, very hard to embarrass me on anything. Um, because I don't know why. Somewhere in there was supposed to be this shame gland, and I let it go a long time ago. And so I thought to myself, what a waste of a talent, which in a way can sound like obligation, but to me, it's like I love telling stories. I love to write. I love to do these things. What is stopping me from putting myself out there? And if I can find a way to make someone feel less alone, that's wonderful.
Like it's Jay. Sorry. We were just talking about Jay. We're like, what's happening with Jason?
Oh, sweet. I didn't realize who that was. Okay, because I'm used to seeing the podcast handle. Hey, Jay. I hope you're doing okay, buddy. So yeah, so to me, like, it just kind of goes back to like this, like, yeah, maybe you could argue that some of that is like an obligation, but I don't necessarily intend for it to be that way. For me, it's just like I had this fire, this thing sitting inside me that I felt compelled to let out for my own well-being. And if no one ever read it, if no one ever did anything with it, like, that's fine. I did it for me.
So the difference is compelled and obligated.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's the key for me. Again, yeah. For me, like that's how I deviate from it, because I still act with that every single day. If someone writes a shitty comment on YouTube, because you and I both know that's where people do it the most. They do it on other places too, but YouTube is the ground zero for nasty comments. Whenever someone writes that, I couldn't care less, because it's like, dude, I didn't do this for you. Then it wasn't for you. Like, I'm sorry that you are upset by something I said or did or whatever. Like, then it wasn't for you.
Or it was.
That's okay.
And they're just not well enough to get it yet.
And that's not for me to decide. I go as far as to simply say, like, it's like anything in life. I mean, like, I really, like, it's a big pet peeve of mine when someone says a particular piece of art or something, it sucks. It's like, no, then it just wasn't for you.
Right.
It just wasn't for you. That's okay. And so, because there's an audience for everything, and I think everything has a place in this world, and I hope whatever I do finds the people who need it when they need it. And if it wasn't you at this time, so if you get some kind of thrill out of talking shit to me on the internet when you don't even know me personally, I'll be your punching bag, dude, because clearly you needed that. I don't. So maybe I helped you in a different way, and that's fine. All I've ever tried to do with any of this stuff is put it out there for the world so people can find it. But I do want to ask you about this, because I think this is something that we share also in this journey, is that, like, there is the business element of this, right? Yeah. Like, there is for both of us. Now, you are full time with it, whereas I'm not. It's more on the side. But I would love to one day get to a place where I'm just making content, whether it's doing speeches, this show, social media, like, whatever. I would love to get to a point where, like, that was enough in book sales to do this full time. I would love for that to happen.
Me too.
But you're going after it. But, like, so how do you cope with the balance of, like, mental health now has become not just a hobby or an interest or something you're compelled to do, but it is also a bit of your business? How do you relate to that?
It's tough. I'm not gonna lie. Because it's like, well, it's a lot like the healing journey. It's not linear either, the financial part of it. And like I've told you before, like, I don't care to be a Joe Rogan. I just want to help my wife out with the groceries and the car payment. Like, we have very modest lives. It doesn't need much, but that said, I do. I'm no expert either, but I've put 4 years into this, 8 years advocating and doing talks and stuff, and it's like, I don't feel like I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I do feel like I do have some knowledge in this stuff now, and I've honed my skills somewhat. So I'm hopeful that financially in the next little while here, things will pick up and I'll get a sponsor or two again, or I'll get more speaking gigs or whatever. And again, it's not like because this is such a weird place to be in, because mental health and addictions, you just want to help people, right? But there does come a point where it's like, okay, I've spent so much time on this, it's like I almost feel guilty taking people's money. So now I have a friend that's like helping me out with it, so she's the one. I like, you go ahead and ask people for the money, I can't do it, so if you want to help me out and do that for me, cool, that's great. So I'm feeling hopeful, because I do have someone that's helping me out a little bit with that. And I mean, that's a whole other skill. Like, I don't understand these people that, like, become successful with a podcast or whatever on their own. It's like, people go to school for years to be able to understand promotion. It's like, how much grinding it just comes natural to some people too, I guess. I don't know. and it doesn't come natural to me. I never went to school for it. I know I'm not good at it, and I don't like it. I like the creating part. So, so something else I have a hard time doing is asking for help. So in a way, I actually am kind of proud of myself that I asked for help because I've been trying to do it for 4 years on my own, and I'm just spinning my tires a little bit. I mean, technically, I guess I kind of have a somewhat successful podcast if you're just looking at like numbers and not finances. So, okay, I did that part, but now I need help with the other part. So
the monetization aspect of it.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
I
I
think
mean,
something
success means different things for different people, right?
right.
So it's all perspective. So success for me means I can have this little house in this little city and be able to do the things I love.
Yeah, yeah, and you touched on so many great points. I know for me, like one of the things I kind of separate is like one, I will always have certain parts of this that I do for free, whether that's making content, whether that's for a speech maybe that I get paid to do, then I'll do one at another organization that's a nonprofit that I do for free. That's where how I kind of wrestle with some of those things, and unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, commercial success then also means I can help more people, right? I can be
Exactly.
in more places, I can do more things to provide access. Because it's the people with the old adage of when you're on the airplane, you have to put the face mask on yourself first before you can help anybody else. Because if you can't, if you like you said, like if you can't keep a roof over your own head, how can you help anybody else as being an advocate, right?
Exactly.
Well,
I think of it like, okay, if I do make some money, then I can hire someone to promote it more, so then more people can listen to the podcast, so that more people can get help.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also there's something to be said for like the type of products, for lack of a better word, the type of products that we produce, right? Like, so for me right now, for those who don't know, the only ways that I monetize right now, any of my social media is not monetized. Thresholds are actually pretty high on those things. So it's pretty hard to get money from views especially early on. So the only places I've achieved I have been paid to speak at a place. I have gotten royalties from my book, and I have a merch store. That's it. That's what I have. Those are my monetization efforts, and I'm fine with all those things because, like, to me, like, if you want to support me, you want to buy a book, that's great. Or you want to buy a shirt with like the title of the book or one of the sayings I have or something on it, great. I don't feel like any guilt because I didn't. It's not like there are certain people that in the mental health space that maybe like would sell a bill of goods that they know aren't necessarily valuable. Like maybe I don't want to pick on anybody here. That's not what this show's about. But you know what I mean? Like there are some things in this space that I will never ever sell because I for me ethically I wouldn't feel right about it because it's for me it feels gross, it feels icky. And so I think that's
create my own courses. You have to, yeah, that's
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't possess the expertise to give you a course. So why on earth would I ever pretend, even if I had the audience to justify that? Like I don't possess the expertise to create a curriculum for you to be a life coach. That's not who I am. It's not what I offer. It's not what I bring to the table. And if I ever try to, no matter what level of audience I grow to, like that's me knowing that I'm selling a bill of goods for the sake of selling a bill of goods.
yeah.
But like my book, I worked really hard on that, and I'm really proud of what it is. My next book, I'm working also very hard on it, and I'm very proud of what it's becoming. And so, yeah, if people want to buy it, that's great. But like, there's no obligation to. All the same kind of stuff I talk about is available on this show. It's available on, social media. It's available in different places. Like you can find me. I'm always going to make room for stuff to be just open to the conversation. And all the commercial success just means for me is a better opportunity to promote it, to put more things out there, to continue this conversation and continue the mission.
Exactly. Yeah. Can you hold on a sec? I just have to check something.
Oh.
Hi! My name is Harry. Haratonin, to be exact. Hey! Ignore that hand. Anyway, I am the bunny from Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. Hey, get out of here. It's my interview. Sorry about that.
I wondered if he was going to make a surprise guest appearance. Nice to see you.
That was, he's a real piece of work. I love him, but yeah, He's like a
I
mental
get it.
illness. I just accept him
I,
now.
I love you for what you are, but you're also bringing me down.
Well, I'm glad people like
Yeah.
serotonin.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's being incorporated in the future of Bunny Hugs Mental Health, but
He's the
there you
mascot, if nothing else.
go. Right. Oh, maybe it could be more merch.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I'm waiting for the day that I'm walking somewhere and I see someone wearing a shirt that I know I created. Like that'll be hilarious. It's not. I've sold maybe 26 shirts in the last like year. So let's be very clear. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Merch
But
is a
it,
tough slog.
but it's. Well, I mostly did it because like I was like people were like, oh, I'd love to have a shirt that says the name of your book on it. And so that's where it all started for me. Like I didn't know intention of making a merch store. And then I was like, cool, I'll do that. And then I was like, hey, you know what? I've got some things that I like and I think are good sayings that I think would be fun to say and put it out there. And people have responded pretty well to it. So yeah, it's that was never like a goal to have a merch store. It just kind of happened organically from people's request of like, I want to support your. I already bought a copy of your book. I want to wear a shirt that says the title of your book on it.
Right, right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's like friends and family buy merch, and then
yeah,
that's kind of
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, and
But
which
there's
is
so many
fine.
good, like, there's so many good websites now. It's like you don't have to keep stock or inventory or anything. It's just you
Dude.
design it and done.
Oh, I mean that's actually like a really fascinating conversation to me about anything in the arts. Anything in the arts. I don't care if it's stand up comedy, music, book
Porn.
writing. Sure. I mean, honestly, for the sake of what I'm about to say, sure. Because like the barrier to entry has gotten so low on all of these avenues, right? So
Yeah.
in porn situation, they have OnlyFans now. But like if you're a musician, you can put stuff on Spotify, and we can have a whole separate conversation about what they should be paying and shouldn't be paying. But nonetheless, there was a time for a long time in this world where if you were an independent artist, there was no way for anyone to find your music unless they happened to live in the area where you were doing a show and you could buy a CD afterwards.
Yeah,
There was
exactly.
no version. There was no like 20 years ago. There was no version of it where you could be a small time band and some kid in California found your music when you're from Indiana. There's no way that
Yeah.
was happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
so now you can. So like, and so same with writing a book. Like for a long time, oh, he's coming back. Oh man, serotonin, what are you doing?
Keep going, I'm listening.
But like so writing a book, like for a long time in the space, if you wanted to write a book, you had to find a publisher, do the thing, get pitched, get it all signed, and odds are, if you don't already have an audience, they're going to give you the lowest deal they can. They're not really going to promote it, and that was the end of the conversation. And so now you can, for those who don't know, like my book, Todd's children's book, like we're on Kindle Direct Publishing. We just put it out there, and they sell it. And the way that the business model works is, you can pretty much cut it into about a third, right? So like a third of it goes to them in profit, a third goes to them for costs, and then a third goes to you, which is still way better of a royalty than you're probably going to get it from a publisher unless you're already
Right.
famous.
Right.
But the downside is everyone can do that now. So now your competition's gone while the barrier to entry is lowered. The cost, the competition has gone up tremendously.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting place to be in because it's now easier than ever to make a podcast, put music out, do all these things. But the unintended consequence of that is the market is not flooded so much, and so you're competing with a million people. There was a time where if you had started your podcast when you did, if you had started it, so many years earlier, you would probably be a lot further along in the journey just because there weren't as many podcasts. Now my joke when this got turned into a podcast was, I'm another white boy with a podcast.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's how it felt. And so it's like, how do you manage the competition aspect of all this too? Because we're talking about the mental health of the commercial side, but what about the competition that exists, or do you even want to call it that?
I generally don't because of what it is. Oh no, more people are talking about mental health and addictions. Like that was my whole point of doing this. But as long as no one's like trying to undercut me or do anything personal against me, I mean, hey, the more the merrier. Well, but so yeah, I don't know. And I mean, some people might do that or have done that, but whatever. I feel as though my intentions are pure. That's all I care about, and whatever.
I
Ah.
I had a line that I loved that it's one of my favorite things I've ever written, which was like, "You can't beat me because I want to see you win too."
Ah, nice.
That's the trick, right? Like there is no one competing with me because like I want to see every author in the space do well too. Because that, like to your point, that just means the topic of mental health is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like that's a good thing to me.
Yeah,
So I'm not going to root against anybody. To your point, like maybe if someone did something very specific to hurt me or something, maybe then I might feel that way. But even then, it's like maybe I'm not rooting for you, but I don't necessarily want to see you fail either. So that's where I would kind of like rectify that with my own mind. So
yeah, 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 exactly. Well, it's been nice watching people over the last 15 years do more talking about this. I think it's in part because we do live in a society where it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, for the most, I mean, of course, there's homeless people and poor people and stuff, but as a society, we're in a good enough place that we can actually start worrying about things like this, whereas our parents didn't, right? Like, or our grandparents, like they were busy killing Nazis, like they're just trying to stay alive. So now it's like, hey, it's kind of nice that we're in a place where we can actually deal with this stuff, and a lot of it is actually generational trauma because their grandparents fought Nazis. But
yeah, it was interesting. I think I might be wrong on this, but I think it was 50 Cent. He had something where he was on like a radio talk show and he was talking about. He said, as far as I'm concerned, depression is a luxury. Depression is a luxury, and the way he framed it was at first I was like, what? No, and he's like, well, think about it. A mom who's working 3 jobs to put food on the table and keep a roof over her kid doesn't have time to be depressed. It's not saying she's not. It's not what he's saying. He's just saying she just doesn't have time to recognize it and think about it because she's busy putting food on the table. Like that's what she's doing. And so there is something to be said of like the privilege of these topics that we talk about. It is a privilege to get to ponder your anxiety. It is a
yeah,
privilege to get to I don't know, but like, I get where like that hearing that if you just took like a clip of just that and like ran with it, and he says anxiety is a privilege. I'm like, no, what I'm saying is it's a hard thing to deal with, but there is something to be said for everyone's had something in the history of the world because people will be like, oh, these people back then we don't have all these things like depression and stuff and anxiety and ADHD. We didn't have that back in the day. Well, okay, first off, yeah,
yeah,
we did. It was a different version. It was just a different version of that.
yeah,
Or we didn't recognize it as such.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
there weren't so many autistic people back in the day. Yeah, there were. We just didn't call it that. It's
Yeah,
okay. We just didn't
just
call it
called them
that.
lazy.
Yeah, or like they didn't fit in, or they were a little off, or something. We used improper language. We learned. We evolved as a society. We learned these things, and we got better for it.
Yeah,
And so, again, the unintended consequences of that is we are more aware than ever before.
yeah.
And so, how do we look in the mirror and how do we rectify those things?
Maybe having anxiety isn't a luxury. It's having the knowledge that you have anxiety and you're able to treat it is more of the luxury
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, think about the
or
advancements
a
we've
privilege. Sorry, go ahead.
think about no, I mean think about the advancements we've had in medical technology, right? Like I mean think about the condition I have for those who don't know that why I mentioned earlier the brain surgeries and stuff. I have a condition called hydrocephalus. If you were born not that long ago in the history of the world and had what I had, you would die. That's just the way it is. So I mean I don't know the exact year, but they invented a mechanical device called a shunt that drains out cerebrospinal fluid because that's ultimately what hydrocephalus is. Hydrocephalus means water, hydro on the brain, cephalus. And so your body drains that out naturally from your head.
Your body
Mine
does.
doesn't.
Oh,
No,
okay. Sorry. You're right.
your body drains it out, absorbs it naturally. Mine does not do that. It brings it in, but none leaves. So I have a mechanical device called a shunt to drain it out for me. The problem is it's a man-made piece of plastic. It will break. And when it does, I've got X amount of time to get to a hospital or yeah, and get it fixed. But if you were born, again, not all that long ago, like within the 1900s, again, I forget the exact year, if you were born prior to the invention of the shunt, you just died.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so the same can be said for some of these like mental health like that. It's like, cool, we're now more aware of like, oh, this person that we can look back on history and be like, oh, this person, that committed or that, that died by suicide, perhaps they were depressed. And maybe if we can uncover some of the whys of those things, maybe we can help get ahead of some of those things to avoid that tragic outcome.
Yeah. And honestly, as horrible as COVID was, it actually brought a lot of this stuff into light because people were stuck at home,
Yeah.
under their own microscopes. And there's been a ton of like, well, for example, AA meetings were shut down because everything was shut down. And now there's all types of new treatments. It's no longer here's a 12-step group and that's all there is. Now there's all types of modalities and treatments and even medication for opioids and to get off opioids and stuff. And it's no longer just I can never remember the name. The drink doesn't matter. But now there's actual like pill forms to get off um, opioids. And I mean, the other thing is like with COVID, a lot of people that would never experience or never understood mental health or mental illness or challenges like that got to experience it. And so now it's like a lot more people are aware. And, there was a big spotlight for almost everyone that like, oh shit, this is what depression feels like, or this is what anxiety feels like, or oh, okay, I get it now. This does suck. you know, Not that I'm glad people all over the world got depression and anxiety, but in a way, it was kind of nice because now we all kind of understand that it's a bigger problem than what we thought maybe.
Oh, I mean, go back to your earlier point. You mentioned you had been hospitalized because you made a suicide attempt, and then when you got out, it was when Robin Williams passed, and someone made that comment, and then you wrote your piece on that. And the big thing that the person that commented said was, how selfish, all these different things. And for me, like, let me be clear. Like, I understand how a person can feel that way about someone who has died by suicide. Like, I can understand where you can have the feeling of this is so selfish. This is so, I can't believe they did this to the people around them. I understand how someone gets to that point.
Yeah.
But I think so much of that is filtered by the reality that you've never been in that dark of a place to wonder what it's like to not want to be alive. Like, and so the way I always try to frame it when I'm talking to someone who kind of has that ideology, I always try to say, think about the worst pain you've ever felt in your entire life. Imagine if that feeling never went away for a period of time. Like, or maybe you don't have that. Maybe you don't have a thing that you can relate it to. But can you imagine being in so much pain? Maybe you have awful cancer that's eating away at your body, or you've been horribly maimed or injured in an accident, and you get to the point where you're like, I'm in so much pain. You know what? I wish it was over.
Mm-hmm.
If you can allow your brain to go there, then you can also understand that that's how it feels for the person who is in that position. And again, I'm not saying it's okay to take your life. That's not what I'm saying at all. But that's where that person got to. They got to a point where it was easier for them to deal with to go with that route than to feel this feeling anymore. And I think that's something everyone can relate to, but it's getting people to sit down at the table and have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I know the person that made that comment,
Oh, you
and
know them personally?
yeah,
Wow.
and they weren't well themselves at that time, and I think some people also judge because they have had dark moments and they didn't go to those extremes. So then they get judgy. It's like, oh, we've all had hard times. I've been in psych wards too, and I would never do that or whatever. But again, I feel like those people just aren't either well enough to understand or emotionally mature enough to get it or whatever. The reality is we are all very, very different, and our brains are all very, very different. And I'm assuming anyone that takes their life, it's got to be the most incredibly difficult decision. And some people, like myself, with ADHD and addiction issues in the past, with ADHD, you're also very spontaneous. You have emotional dysregulation, so you can fly off the handle real quick and be spontaneous, and all that negative thoughts you've been had in your head for years, and it just blows up, and you're high and you're drunk. Like it's no judging for people that do take their own lives, because everyone does it for it's just so complex and everyone's different, but um, I don't know. Again, I don't know where I was going with that. I'd
Because
like to read
I
this
mean,
comment here, though, if that's
go for
okay. Someone here said, my maternal grandfather was shamed for his depression, even by his own daughter after his death. And so, I mean, that right there shows you how far humans have come in the last whatever decades. And even when you read obituaries now, and they say they died by addiction or they lost their battle with depression, it's like, oh, it's so nice that
we're framing
people are like,
it.
yeah, because for the longest time, in obituaries, people wouldn't say anything. It was like this deep, dark secret or this shameful thing, and it's like, it's fine. We're humans.
Yeah.
We
Well,
all know people.
yeah, and it's about bringing, like, I'm sorry, we lost the right to be able to bury our heads in the sand on this anymore. Too bad. I don't care. I remember,
Yeah.
like, I made a whole, like, series of videos about this because, like, and I remember, like, I had been blogging and talking about mental health for years before I ever mentioned to anyone. Hi, Jody. Before I had ever mentioned on any public platform that I have had suicidal ideation and thoughts. Because I was, I mentioned at the beginning, I generally shame. That's like the one thing that has always been stuck inside me that I've been afraid to talk about for a long time. And I realized, like, dude, who am I? I'm supposed to be the guy advocating for this, and I can't bring it up because that's how shameful it feels in the moment to everybody. Because we still have very much a stigma, as much as mental health has really grown a lot. That topic is still very sensitive to a lot of people, and again, understandably so, because the end result is someone's not here anymore. That's going to bring a lot of feelings, no matter what context that happens, right? But we lost the ability to bury our heads and say we can't do that anymore. It's one of the leading causes of death across the world, especially in the United States. I don't know the stats on Canada. I used to have the ones in the United States memorized.
Men my age, it's, well, I think maybe the top killer.
In the United States at one point in time, it was the highest rate of growth was middle-aged men. Was middle-aged men.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention had noted that the highest rate of suicide growth was middle-aged men. You know, the typical demographic who's also notorious for, especially middle-aged white men, you know, hey, rub some dirt in it, bury your head, bury your feelings. Maybe just maybe that wasn't the best option for us. And sooner we realize that, and the sooner we start talking about it. So, like, I hate it. I absolutely hate it for any single person who's ever been in the position where they think the world would be better off without them. Having said that, I want to live in a world where everyone can look at that with empathy.
Yeah.
And not anger. And I don't think we're there. We're not there yet, unfortunately, but I hope so. Like, my mission on that topic is to start trying to educate people on that conversation, trying to shine light on this as a reality that, like, it's not as black and white as you think it is, where it's like, oh, well, they just, they didn't think about anybody else. No, they genuinely believed that everyone would be better off without them. I know I did. I operated under
Still
the
do at
assumption.
times. When's the last time you had a suicidal thought? Honestly.
And I'm not just being, like, coy here. I truly don't know when the last time was, because I don't know where to draw the line of, like,
right,
harm versus that harm. I mean, I've definitely been like, oh man, I deserve, like, whatever negative feeling I have. It's been a while, but I'm sure it's more recent than I'm willing to admit. Not for shame, just because I truly I can't think about it right now. Caught me on the spot.
Right.
But like, no, I mean, because that's the thing. Sorry, I think actually there's an important distinction there. We talk a lot about the people who actually went through with it or even attempted.
Yeah.
But there's a large percentage of people who we'll never know about that have considered the notion that the world would be better off without them, but you never hear it from them.
For 10 years, every day I had suicidal thoughts.
Yeah,
I
and it's not
still
as
get suicidal thoughts, and I'm an
and it
advocate.
and it's
But
still okay.
sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, I was just all I was gonna say was like it's not even as simple as like here's how I'll carry it out myself. Maybe
Yeah,
it's something as simple as I am here at this red light. If I just left my foot off the brake, all of a sudden this isn't my problem anymore.
right.
And and that's a really dark thought. And I'm not trying to like glorify it at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like if you're someone that's been in that position to feel that way, you may not recognize in the moment that what that is, but that's a suicidal ideation. Like that's you thinking about an outcome that results in your death, and you are at least in some ways responsible for.
Right. For me, it's even, I'm so tired of feeling this way, living this way. I hope I don't wake up. It's not, I want to kill myself, but it's like, I just want to disappear. I hope I fall asleep and don't wake up, or, thoughts like that. For me, it's when, and that's fine. I mean, that's just how my brain, whatever, that's how my brain goes. Some people never have suicidal thoughts. Mine is just like that. But now for me, it's like I have about, and I allow myself those thoughts. It's when it's like, this is now an option. It's like, well, I could do this. Then it's like, okay, self-aware enough now. All right, what am I not doing? What do I need
Yeah.
to do again? Who do I have to talk to? What's going on? And then I go from there.
And to be fair, I think that's when you asked me the question. Like that's what I was trying to separate. Ultimately, was like, to me, I'm with you. I think there's a difference between this is a viable option versus, oh well, this could happen. Because let's be
Yeah,
honest, in common everyday language that people use, whether they've truly believed that they've had suicidal ideation or not, they will say something like, "Oh, I guess I'll just go kill myself." How
yeah,
often have you heard that phrase from somebody? It just in a passing comment. It can have
yeah,
in work dynamics. Like it's such a common, at least maybe not in Canada, but in the United States, it's a very common phrase that I've heard people say. Oh, I guess I'll just go kill myself.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like you hear that, so like it's like, but again, I don't think that person has actual intent, and so I think that that's an important. I can't remember the last time that I had it with actual intent, but I'm confident. Hell, even in the last month, at some point, it's like, oh well, this would be. I'm sure that's happened, but I separate the two because I know that I don't have the intent there.
right, right. Well, even when I'm having those little thoughts, there is a bit of intent, but it's not a serious viable option. It's not like, okay, well, I could do that, But actually, when I was in addiction treatment, all our counseling was in group counseling, and I think it was like my third week in there. My counselor was, because sometimes we'd listen to music. She put a song on. It was kind of a depressing song, and she's like, "Oh my God, the song makes me want to kill myself. It was so depressing." And I gave her shit. I was like, "Hey, you know our situations. We've talked about this, and like, you can't use that language around here because, I mean, in your everyday life, yeah, whatever. But like in here, like, be careful what you're saying." And she was like, "Holy shit, yeah, I never, yeah, you're
Oh, I
right."
mean, and people truly don't think about it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we do that with common language of not just the topic of suicide, but like the topic of like just oh they're a little crazy.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh they're a little off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim over here, he's just a little off, and we do that, and it's very. I wish more people would act with some intentionality about the things that they say because they do matter, and it's not to sit here and be on this policing of political correctness. That's not because I don't think anyone who says most of those things has ill intent. I'm just saying
Hmm.
after the fact, think about that a little bit and be like, oh, I bet what if Jim really is going through something?
Yeah.
How would
Yeah.
how am I helping or hurting that scenario?
Yeah.
And that's all. Just
I mean,
we're none of us are
as a
perfect.
smartass and a sarcastic smartass, I mean, I say shit all the time, even around
1,000%.
mental health. I have a dark sense of humor, but I
It's
pick
one
and
of my
choose my
favorite
like.
things about you because we can share on that.
Yeah.
Because like I can make some jokes about it, but like and probably to a fault. Like my wife, her like least favorite thing about me is like when it comes to like stand-up comedy, I lean so heavily on self-deprecation.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at it like a value add of like, oh, I can laugh at myself. I can make fun of this.
No shame.
Exactly. Like I feel, to me, it's like taking back the power. And then she framed it to one time, and she was like, some of that I think is true. She said, but some of that I think you actually believe, and I think it's a crutch. You lean on it because you know it works. It's funny every time you do those things, and it's a bit of a crutch for you. And you maybe deep down somewhere in there you believe it. If you say it enough times, you might believe it. And I
Right.
never really thought about it, and so it's been like a fun challenge for me to like write material that's not necessarily self-deprecating. I know I can always have it around as an option.
Intent.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting part. But no, I share with you like, and so like, and none of us. So like this is when I said like something I want people to challenge themselves to do these things. That's not me saying I'm perfect at it. Hell no, hell no, far
Yeah.
from it. If there's okay, we've now been on this thing for an hour and 20 minutes. If you have stuck with this the entire time, if there's actually one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it is know that I went on my little rant earlier about people on social media and taking the right advice from the right people. Something else I will say, even if they are credentialed, even none of us is perfect. Not a single one of us. There is no person that exists in this world. Because like one of the ways that I have beat myself up over the years is like I love to think, oh, I'm this emotionally mature person. I've done all the homework. I've done the therapy. I'm still in therapy. I'm still working on this. I know better. I know better. And yet then I still do some of the things that I know better.
100%.
and it's like so you're not like it's not about being perfect. It's not about being perfect. To me, the goal of healing and growth and all of this stuff, to me, the number one goal that you should have is to recognize it and try to be better.
Right. I mean, the biggest tool I have is just being more self-aware, and that's it. Because and being brutally honest with myself. Once I'm self-aware and I analyze okay, this is what's going on. Brutally honest, what should I do about it now?
Right.
And yeah, like I said, I still have bad thoughts. I do, like you said, I do all the things that I shouldn't be doing. I'm not telling people don't do those things. It's more like a warning. When you catch yourself doing those things, this is what I then do, and you can either emulate me or figure it out yourself what to do.
Yeah.
Because yeah, so yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
maybe I am perfect.
I don't have to be your wife to tell you the answer is no.
Wow.
Um,
We all have different ideas of perfection. So
perfection's a vantage point, to be fair. But like one of mine for me is like also like much like a lot of people, like I get angry. I get angry and I catch myself and my anger is not always yelling. My anger, even though I'm a loud person, like my anger, not always reflected in that way. But it's my tone and my frustration, and I take it out on somebody else.
animals.
And
Oh.
and so like, no, no.
Sorry. Come here, kitty.
See, again, we have a dark sense of humor. That's part of this relationship. He just catches me off guard sometimes. My cats are fine, I promise. But no, like I remember there's like one day that like sticks out to me, like where like I was frustrated at work and like, some things that made me angry, and then my wife asked me a question, and it was
How dare
something
she?
like I knew she knew the answer to, and I was like, or I've told her before, and like under normal circumstances, not a big deal, but I was already upset, I was already angry, I was already these things, and I was just like, and I caught it in the moment, and I was like, this is not directed at you. You did nothing wrong. Nonetheless, I need to go in the other room and like cool off because what I'm feeling has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. But you just happen to be right in front of me right now. That's a good version of learning how to deal with your stuff. But sometimes I'm not that smart in the moment, and sometimes I still fly off the handle because that's human nature. But then you can catch yourself in the moment. You recognize it. Hey, I know I've been better in some places. That moment I wasn't my best self. I'm not proud of that. I'm really sorry. Let's communicate. Let's talk to each other. Let's move forward.
Right. So you're still self-aware. It just might take 10 more hours than instant self-awareness.
Oh yeah. I mean, like that's one of my favorite conversations I have with my therapist. Like we talk about this. Like I was like, so I mean, you're the expert. Like she's like, well, I still get it wrong. Like I went to school for it. I work with it every day. I do all these things. And I still get it wrong.
Yeah.
Perfection isn't like I guess if you're going to describe perfect isn't getting it right every single time. Perfect is getting it right more often than you did before, and in the moments you don't, recognizing it, understanding it, and trying to be better the next time and learning from it.
I'd love to tell you another AAism that I love. Progress, not perfection.
Yes, that's literally a chapter in my book.
Oh, there you go.
Or no,
You stole it from me.
yeah. I speak to that in the book. I don't know if it's actually the chapter title. I'm blanking right now. I know there's process over outcomes, but like progress, not perfection. Yeah, it's perfection again is a vantage point. Someone might think something was perfect. Like you talked about playing music. Like you watch a band perform, you're like, oh my god, they played that perfectly. Little did you know, actually they missed 4 notes here, they did this over here. But in your vantage point, you're like, that was exactly what I wanted out of the experience. You had no idea what they were meaning to do though. And
Mm-hmm.
if they realize it's completely flawed, screwed up, they're fighting about it backstage,
Yeah.
and you have no idea. It's a vantage point, but progress is the pursuit that we should all be after. Perfection is just
It's unattainable.
no.
Yeah. So really, it's like, yeah, don't be so hard on yourself. If you do get mad at your wife, and then afterwards you do realize, it's like, okay, it's not about being perfect. You're not going to catch yourself every time, but there's progress because you are now self-aware and you're going to go apologize. And that's, to me, that's progress because there's 15 years with my wife. I don't think I apologized once.
And it's not, by the way, it's not just apologizing. It's apologizing and knowing why you're apologizing, not just apologizing for the sake of apologizing.
Yeah.
It's knowing why you should apologize, communicating and sharing in that way too. I think that's an important part of the lesson too, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just apologize, that doesn't have any weight to it. Anyone can say, I'm sorry. Can you say, I'm sorry with intent to be better?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's something we learned in treatment too. It's guilt and resentments and how those things will eat you alive. So if you're full of guilt, so like, so it's nice that you're making amends right away as opposed to 15 years of guilt and shame built up in you. But anyway, yeah.
But also, like, no one owes you forgiveness either. That's the other part of this too. And I'm sure you recognize that. Like, I know I do in mine, and I imagine from your knowing your story, when you look back on those moments, when you were still abusing alcohol, drugs, everything like that, I'm sure there's people you hurt along the way. I know in my life when I had to do a lot of growing up and figure out a lot of things, I know like my parents, I hurt them in so many different ways that it makes me sick to think about still.
Yeah.
And thankfully they forgave me, and we worked on it, we got better, we grew from it. But along the way, you're gonna hurt people, and they don't owe you a damn thing.
Yeah, that's right.
You hope that they forgive you. You hope that it works out, but you shouldn't be doing it for the forgiveness. You should be getting better for your own personal growth. And yeah, ideally, some people will be like, you know what, I recognize you were in a bad spot. I appreciate your intention, and we move forward. But they might just say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't owe you that.
Yeah, and the thing, so as much as I'm not in 12-step groups anymore, there are a lot of really great life lessons in them, and one was the forgiveness part. So
right.
Going around making amends and by asking people for forgiveness, humbling yourself so much to actually approach people that you did shit to and ask for their forgiveness. It actually taught me how to forgive other people, because when someone does apologize, you're like, eat shit, man, get out of here. It's like, oh my god, I know what I felt like when I was asking for forgiveness, and this is pretty humbling for them to even ask for forgiveness. So like, all right, let's move past this, and or maybe their intention was never ever to hurt me anyway. So it's just, yeah, yeah. I learned a lot through treatment, man, and some of it I'm just figuring out now. And it was 8 years later. It's like, oh, that's why they talked about that.
Oh man, I could talk for hours about the different things that like you realize as you get older, you're like, oh my gosh, like I look back now and I see, oh, how did I not catch that? But in the moment, it felt like something completely,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I
Wax
can do
on,
that.
wax off. I get it now.
Oh, I mean, he was, oh, my life is a giant Christopher Nolan movie where it's just constantly, you have to reevaluate things over and over again to be like, oh yeah, now I think I get it. And then you watch it again, you're like, did I actually get it? And then now, and you're like, oh no, now I definitely got it. And 10 years later, I'll realize I was completely wrong, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, there's Easter eggs here.
You mean?
I'm my own father?
Yeah.
No.
That
Man.
sounds like Christopher Nolan. So I know we're now like an hour and a half into this thing.
I know.
This always happens with us,
love
and
it.
I love it too. But I want to be respectful of your time as well too. We have let's call it. We have 2 minute wrap up. So for those who don't know, Todd, where can we find you?
Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. It's I'm on all the sociables, YouTube. The podcast is called Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. It's anywhere you can find audio podcasts. And my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. It's on Amazon. I probably have something else I'm forgetting. Me, serotonin.
Cannot forget serotonin. Cannot forget serotonin.
My interview, buddy.
Absolutely.
So
I appreciate you, man. And then for those watching, if you want to listen back to this, this will now be available in a podcast format on Spotify. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what people think about this episode. Thank you everyone for the positivity. Those who brought questions to the table, appreciate every single one of you. Be kind to each other, be better, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching, Dan.
See you later.
Thanks, buddy.